Thomas Jefferson is best known for his role as the third President of the United States. However, his contributions to American history go far beyond his time as president. Yes, he wrote the Declaration of Independence, served as the first Secretary of State under President George Washington, and served as Vice President under John Adams. But Thomas Jefferson was so much more than these bullet points in history. Today we look a little closer at this historical figure in a segment we like to call 5 Curious Things You May Not Have Known About Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was a skilled architect. As a student at the College of William and Mary, he purchased his first book on the subject and later assembled one of the largest architecture libraries in America. He was particularly influenced by the classical style of Andrea Palladio, who emphasized symmetry, proportion, and the use of columns. These principles then came to define the architecture of the early United States, first in Richmond with Jefferson's design of the state capitol, and then in Washington, D.C., where he influenced decisions on the design of the U.S. Capitol and the White House. He also designed his own home, Monticello, which is considered one of the most beautiful and innovative houses in America. The design of Monticello reflects Jefferson's love for architecture, science, and technology, and his desire for privacy. He also designed the University of Virginia. He considered the design of the university as one of his proudest achievements in his life. Thomas Jefferson was a polymath, meaning he had a wide range of knowledge and skills. He was fluent in 5 languages, including Latin, Greek, French, Italian, and Spanish, which he learned on a single 19-day voyage. He was an expert in subjects such as science, philosophy, and law. He was a passionate advocate of education and believed that a well-educated citizenry was essential for the preservation of democracy. He was a pioneer in the fields of zoology and botany, mainly in his role as president of American Philosophical Society. And once, when whaling became a minor political issue, he composed an entire treatise on the matter. Finally, he was a prolific innovator. He improved the moldboard plow and the polygraph, invented the pedometer, the swivel chair, and created his own enciphering device, the wheel cipher, after discovering that his correspondence was being monitored. Thomas Jefferson has been described as an agriculturist, anthropologist, architect, astronomer, bibliophile, botanist, educator, geographer, horticulturist, inventor, lawyer, linguist, mathematician, meteorologist, musician, paleontologist, philosopher, scientist, statesman, and writer. Quite a resume indeed. Thomas Jefferson had a large library with over 6,000 books. He considered his library as one of his most valuable possessions, and it was considered one of the most extensive personal libraries in the country at the time. Jefferson loved books and learning. He collected books on almost any subject. He read some of the most important and influential books on philosophy and politics. He also had an English language copy of Islam's holy book, the Quran. He got it when he was studying to be a lawyer and wanted to learn about international law. After the British burned the Library of Congress in 1814, Jefferson sold his entire collection of 6,487 books to the U.S. government for $23,950. At the time, Jefferson had the largest personal collection of books in the country. Books were costly, and most were made in Europe and shipped to the United States. Jefferson's book sale helped to reestablish the library, and it became the foundation of the Library of Congress's collection. The original library was very different from Jefferson's collection. It was a working library that members of Congress would need: law, trade, dictionaries, and some classical history. Jefferson's many interests changed the Library of Congress's approach to collecting. It completely altered the notion of what was appropriate for that collection, from needlepoint to architecture. After the purchase, the Library of Congress had more than 2 times as many books as it had when the British attacked. In 1851, a fire in the U.S. Capitol destroyed many books in the library and almost 2/3 of Jefferson's collection. After the fire, a large and beautiful building was put up across the street from the Capitol for the Library of Congress. The library sought replacements of all of Jefferson's books that were burned, and it's been successful in that effort. The collection is almost complete. After Jefferson sold his beloved books, he never saw them again, but he soon began building another collection. When he was finished, he had several thousand. They were sold in 1829, after his death, to pay his debts. The former president loved books, but he also wanted to share them. So even today, the Library of Congress lets researchers use his books. Almost 200 years after he died, Jefferson is still serving the nation he helped create. Years after his wife's death, Thomas Jefferson fathered at least 6 children with one of his slaves, named Sally Hemmings. 4 children survived to adulthood and are mentioned in Jefferson's plantation records: Beverly, Harriet, Madison, and Eston Hemmings. Sally Hemmings worked in Paris as a domestic servant and maid in Jefferson's household. While in Paris, where enslaved people could petition for their freedom, she negotiated with Jefferson to return to enslavement at Monticello in exchange for extraordinary privileges for herself and freedom for her unborn children. Decades later, Jefferson freed all of Sally Hemmings' children. Beverly and Harriet left Monticello in the early 1820s. Madison and Eston were freed in his will and left Monticello in 1826. Jefferson did not grant freedom to any other enslaved family unit. The claim that Thomas Jefferson fathered the children entered the public arena during Jefferson's first term as president. In September 1802, political journalist James T. Callender wrote in a Richmond newspaper that Jefferson had for many years kept as his concubine one of his own slaves. Her name is Sally, and Jefferson had several children by her. Although there had been rumors of sexual relationship between Jefferson and an enslaved woman before 1802, Callender's article spread the story widely. It was taken up by Jefferson's Federalist opponents and was published in many newspapers during the remainder of Jefferson's presidency. DNA tests conducted by Dr. Eugene Foster and a team of geneticists in 1998 shed some light on the rumors. The study tested Y chromosomal DNA samples from male line descendants of Thomas Jefferson's uncle. The results of the study established a high probability that Thomas Jefferson had fathered Eston Hemmings. In January 2000, the Thomas Jefferson Research Committee reported that the weight of all known evidence from the DNA study, original documents, written and oral historical accounts, and statistical data indicated a high probability that Thomas Jefferson was the father of Eston Hemmings, and that he was likely the father of all 6 of Sally Hemmings' children listed in Monticello's records. I've heard people call him Easton, but it's spelled E-S-T-O-N, so I'm calling him Eston. Hey, if it's wrong, come at me in the comments. I'm okay with that. Jefferson's Tombstone has its own curious history. Thomas Jefferson's epitaph, which he wrote himself, does not mention that he was the 3rd president of the United States. Instead, it highlights his role in authoring the Declaration of Independence and his founding of the University of Virginia. He also listed his role as the father of the Statute of Religious Freedom in Virginia, which was one of his proudest accomplishments. This epitaph reflects his belief that his legacy should be based on his contributions to the country and the ideals he stood for, rather than his political career. Jefferson's tombstone was no simple grave marker. The founding father left very detailed instructions for a 3-part stone sculpture. A granite obelisk would sit atop a granite cube and be adorned with an inscribed marble plaque. Visitors flocked to Monticello to see it after it was erected in 1833, and souvenir seekers took to chipping off small chunks of the granite base. Horrified that the whole thing would soon be ruined, Jefferson's heirs ordered a replica to be placed at Monticello and donated the original three-part structure to the University of Missouri in 1883. Missouri was the first school founded within the territory that Jefferson secured with the Louisiana Purchase. The tombstone and the plaque were put on display near the entrance of the school's main building, but the marble piece was soon brought inside for safekeeping. Unfortunately, the building where it was stored burned down in 1892. The plaque survived, but the fire took a heavy toll. Shattered into 5 pieces and with portions crumbling at the edges, the piece was reassembled like a jigsaw and mounted in a plaster compound. The plaque was then placed inside 2 wooden boxes and again put away in an attic. For more than 100 years it had been stored in a wooden box in the dark corner of an unfinished attic at the University of Missouri, too fragile to be put on display. In 2005, a group of university administrators decided to send the plaque to the Smithsonian for restoration. Not only was the restoration successful, but 2 additional copies were made at the same time. In September 2014, the 3 plaques were returned to the University of Missouri. One of the replicas is used for teaching, and the other is adhered to the original granite obelisk and prominently displayed in the main campus quad. As for the original plaque, it is proudly on display in the main campus building. And there you have 5 curious things you may not have known about Thomas Jefferson. If you have any historical figures you'd like to add to these episodes, let us know in the comments. And thanks for watching today, folks. We'll see you next time on 5 Curious Things. Take care.